Many men think the way to keep a woman is simple. Give more attention, try harder, prove your love. But the truth is the opposite. The more you chase, the less respect you get. The moment you stop chasing, everything changes. Your absence becomes powerful, your silence becomes loud, and her ego begins to shake. In this video, we will break down 8 reasons why walking away affects her so deeply. Before we begin, comment, "No more chasing." Number 1. She loses control. Control is something many people quietly crave. When someone knows you will always respond, always forgive, and always stay, they feel safe holding the power, and that quiet power slowly shapes how they treat you. Because when a person believes your attention is guaranteed, they stop protecting the connection and start assuming your presence will remain no matter what they do. And this is where many men unknowingly weaken their own position because they operate from loyalty, while the other person operates from convenience, and convenience slowly replaces appreciation, which is why the pattern becomes painfully familiar to so many men. You send the message first, you wait for the reply, you adjust your plans just to see her, you tolerate delays, cold responses, confusing behavior, and you convince yourself that patience will eventually earn respect. Yet something deeper is happening beneath the surface, because every time you ignore your own boundaries just to keep the connection alive, you teach the other person that your standards are flexible, and once someone learns that your standards bend easily, they stop taking them seriously, which is why control quietly shifts away from you without any dramatic moment announcing it. And suddenly the dynamic becomes one-sided, where you are the one thinking about the relationship, while she is simply responding to whatever level of effort she feels like giving that day. And many men sense this imbalance, but remain trapped because they fear losing the connection entirely. Yet the strange truth of human behavior is that the more you try to secure someone's attention through constant effort, the more predictable you become. And predictable behavior removes tension. And when tension disappears, the emotional investment fades because there is no challenge, no uncertainty, no sense that the other person might walk away. And that is exactly why the moment you stop chasing becomes so powerful, because the pattern breaks instantly and the psychological balance changes without you needing to argue, explain, or demand anything. You simply stop feeding the cycle that kept the other person comfortable, controlling the pace of the connection. And suddenly, the attention you once gave freely becomes unavailable, which forces the other person to confront a new reality where you are no longer orbiting around their schedule or their moods. And that moment often triggers a deep shift, because people instinctively react when control disappears. They start observing your behavior more closely, they begin questioning what changed, and they try to regain the certainty they once had about you. But the real lesson for you is not about how she reacts. The real lesson is about reclaiming ownership of your life. Because once you stop structuring your days around someone else's inconsistent attention, you gain something far more valuable than validation. You gain clarity, and clarity reveals how much time and energy you were sacrificing trying to maintain something that was not being protected equally. Which is why applying Stoic discipline becomes so important here, because discipline teaches you to focus only on what belongs within your control, your actions, your decisions, your standards, and your direction in life. And when you start operating from that mindset, your behavior changes naturally, without needing to perform or prove anything. You wake up and direct your attention toward building your body, strengthening your skills, advancing your work, organizing your environment, planning your goals, and creating structure in your day that does not revolve around waiting for someone else's message. And when you do this consistently, your confidence begins to grow from real progress rather than external approval. And that confidence becomes visible in the way you speak, the way you move, and the way you handle uncertainty. Because a person who is building his own path does not panic when someone becomes distant. He simply continues walking forward, and that quiet independence sends a powerful signal to everyone around him, because it shows that his life is not dependent on anyone's attention. And once you reach that state, something interesting happens. The dynamic that once made you chase begins to reverse, because people respect what stands firmly on its own foundation, and the moment you stop negotiating your worth, you naturally attract interactions that align with your standards, rather than draining your energy, trying to convince someone to treat you well. And once you reach that state, something interesting happens. The dynamic that once made you chase begins to reverse, because people respect what stands firmly on its own foundation, and the moment you stop negotiating your worth, you naturally attract interactions that align with your standards, rather than draining your energy trying to convince someone to treat you well. If you are listening to this and recognizing your own situation in every word, this is exactly why the Stoic Relationship Blueprint exists, a guide built on timeless Stoic principles that show you step by step how to reclaim your focus, rebuild your self-respect, and approach relationships with calm strength instead of confusion. And it is now also available in audiobook form, so you can absorb these lessons while walking, training, or clearing your mind during a quiet moment alone. The link is in the comments, and once you get it, the knowledge is yours permanently, something you can return to whenever life tests you again, a source of guidance that stays with you as you continue becoming the kind of man who never loses himself trying to keep someone else. Number 2. Your absence creates curiosity. Human nature works in a simple way. What is always present becomes normal, and what disappears becomes interesting. And this pattern reveals itself in almost every part of life, because the human mind naturally focuses on what it cannot immediately access, which is why constant availability slowly reduces perceived value even when your intentions are sincere. Because when your attention becomes predictable, it blends into the background of someone's daily routine, like a sound that is always there but rarely noticed. And many men experience this painful shift without understanding why it happens, because they believe consistent effort should strengthen the connection. Yet what often happens instead is that the other person begins taking that effort for granted, since there is no risk of losing it. And this is where curiosity quietly disappears, because curiosity requires uncertainty. It requires space for questions. It requires moments where someone wonders what you are doing, what you are thinking, or where your focus has gone. But when your behavior remains the same every day, those questions never arise because the answers are already obvious. You will text first, you will respond quickly, you will remain available, and once that pattern becomes established, the other person stops actively thinking about you because your presence feels permanent. Yet the moment you redirect your attention toward your own life, something shifts inside the other person's mind, because the routine that once surrounded them changes. Your messages are no longer appearing with the same frequency. Your attention is no longer following the same schedule, and that absence creates a gap in their expectations. And the human mind immediately tries to fill that gap with curiosity, because uncertainty activates attention in a way constant reassurance never can. And this is why stepping back often creates more interest than explaining your feelings repeatedly, because explanations close the conversation, while absence opens questions that the other person must answer within their own thoughts. And that internal questioning often becomes powerful because people naturally replay their interactions when something changes. They begin remembering moments where they might have been dismissive. They start noticing how much effort you used to give, and they compare your previous behavior with your new calm distance. But the most important lesson for you is not the curiosity it creates in someone else. The most important lesson is how that distance allows you to rebuild your focus on things that actually strengthen your life. Because when you stop monitoring someone's attention, You gain the freedom to invest deeply in your own development. And this is where Stoic thinking becomes practical, because it trains your mind to detach from outcomes that you cannot control while committing fully to actions that move your life forward, which means structuring your day around meaningful goals instead of emotional distractions. You wake up with a clear plan. You work on improving your physical health. You sharpen your thinking by reading and learning. You develop professional skills that increase your independence. You organize your finances with discipline, and you build habits that reinforce your self-respect every single day. And when this structure becomes part of your routine, something powerful happens internally, because your sense of worth no longer fluctuates based on how someone responds to you. It begins growing from the evidence you see in your own progress, and that internal stability changes the way people perceive you, because a person who is focused, calm, and purposeful carries a presence that does not chase approval, and curiosity naturally follows people who move through life with direction, because others can sense when someone is building something meaningful instead of seeking validation. And once your attention becomes anchored in growth rather than attachment, your interactions begin shifting toward healthier dynamics, where respect forms naturally rather than being requested. And that transformation is where your real advantage lies, because curiosity may bring someone's attention back toward you, but the deeper victory is becoming the kind of man whose life continues moving forward, regardless of who decides to walk beside him. Number 3. She starts doubting herself. Validation feeds the ego. When someone constantly seeks your attention, it quietly confirms their importance in the dynamic between the two of you. And this is exactly why so many men unknowingly build the pedestal they later complain about, because every extra message sent to chase reassurance, every moment spent explaining your intentions, every attempt to prove loyalty when no one asked for proof becomes another signal that your attention is available without limits. And when attention flows without boundaries, people slowly adapt to it as if it were normal. Yet the moment that attention stops arriving on the same schedule, the internal conversation inside the other person's mind begins changing in ways you never see directly, because people rarely admit these thoughts out loud, but they appear immediately when patterns shift, and suddenly the questions begin forming quietly. Why did he stop reaching out? Why is he not trying to fix this? Why is he not reacting the way he used to react? And that moment of confusion is where the ego begins losing its comfortable position, because it was previously operating under the assumption that your behavior would remain predictable forever. But when that assumption collapses, the mind begins reviewing past interactions, searching for explanations, replaying conversations, remembering moments where your effort was obvious, and slowly realizing that the person who once invested deeply is no longer chasing the same connection. And this is where something interesting begins happening, because doubt is uncomfortable for anyone who previously believed they held the upper position in the dynamic. And this is not about creating guilt or punishment. It is about breaking the illusion that you were the only one concerned about losing the connection. Because once you step away calmly without bitterness, the balance of attention changes direction, and the focus that was once entirely inside your mind moves into hers. And this shift is powerful, because attention always follows uncertainty, and uncertainty forces reflection, and reflection often exposes behavior that was previously ignored. Yet the deeper lesson here belongs to you, not to the other person. Because the reason walking away changes the dynamic is not because you are trying to manipulate emotions, but because you finally redirect your attention toward your own standards and your own direction in life. And that shift begins with a simple but difficult realization that many men avoid for too long, which is that respect cannot grow in an environment where you tolerate behavior that drains your dignity. And Stoic discipline becomes essential at this moment, because it teaches you to examine your actions honestly, and ask difficult questions about how you allowed certain patterns to continue. And once you start asking those questions, the solutions become clear, even if they require uncomfortable changes in your behavior, because you begin recognizing the importance of setting boundaries that protect your time and your attention, rather than giving them away endlessly in hopes that appreciation will eventually appear. And those boundaries start with practical steps that reshape how you live your daily life. You stop checking your phone, constantly waiting for someone to respond. You stop interrupting your goals just to maintain a conversation that offers little clarity. You organize your schedule around meaningful progress instead of emotional distraction. And when you do this consistently, you begin developing a quiet confidence that does not depend on whether someone chooses to stay or leave, and that confidence becomes the foundation of self-respect because it grows from the evidence of your own discipline rather than external validation. And as that discipline strengthens, your perspective changes as well, because you begin recognizing that any connection worth maintaining will naturally involve mutual effort rather than one person carrying the entire weight while the other person casually participates when convenient. And once you internalize that truth, your behavior reflects it automatically. You communicate clearly when something matters. You step back when something becomes one-sided, and you move forward with your life, regardless of whether someone decides to adjust their behavior. And this mindset removes desperation from your interactions, because you are no longer operating from the fear of losing someone. You are operating from the commitment to live with integrity and purpose. And when a person reaches that point, something remarkable happens, because the attention that once drained your energy begins returning in different forms. Sometimes through renewed interest from the same person who underestimated you earlier, sometimes through entirely new opportunities and connections that align better with your standards. But regardless of where that attention comes from, the most important change has already happened within you, because the moment you stop defining your worth through someone else's approval is the moment you reclaim authority over your own direction. And that authority becomes visible in the calm way you handle uncertainty, in the patience you show when things do not unfold immediately, and in the quiet determination you bring to building a life that does not revolve around chasing recognition from people who failed to value your presence when it was freely given. Number 4. Mystery replaces predictability. Predictability removes excitement. When someone can anticipate your every reaction, your every message, and your every decision before it happens, the connection slowly loses the tension that once made it engaging. And many men fall into this pattern without realizing it, because they believe consistency in attention will strengthen the relationship. Yet consistency without boundaries often turns into predictability, and predictability removes curiosity, because the other person already knows how you will respond, regardless of what they do. And when your behavior becomes that easy to read, the dynamic shifts from mutual exploration into routine expectation, where one person invests emotionally, while the other person simply receives the attention without needing to protect it. And that is exactly why stepping back from the cycle changes everything. Because when your actions stop following the old, predictable pattern, the entire rhythm of the interaction shifts instantly, and suddenly the other person no longer knows how you will respond to their behavior, which creates a new sense of curiosity that was previously missing, because the human mind becomes fascinated by what it cannot easily understand. And when you begin focusing on your own direction, instead of reacting to every signal, that curiosity grows naturally without you needing to perform or explain anything. And this is where Stoic thinking becomes extremely practical, because it trains you to develop inner stability rather than emotional impulsiveness, which means your decisions start coming from careful thought rather than momentary reactions. And when you apply that discipline to your interactions, your communication becomes simpler and clearer. You speak when something truly matters and remain calm when something does not require immediate response. And this balance changes how people perceive you, because a person who responds with thoughtful restraint rather than constant availability appears grounded and self-directed. And that grounded presence naturally creates intrigue, because it signals that your life contains priorities beyond chasing approval. And when someone senses that your attention is directed toward meaningful goals, they begin wondering what occupies your time and your mind, which brings curiosity back into the interaction, without you needing to create artificial distance or play psychological games. Because real mystery grows from genuine purpose rather than deliberate manipulation. And this is why the most powerful way to transform your dynamic is not by trying to appear distant, but by actually becoming focused on building a life that demands your attention. You invest in physical discipline by training your body consistently. You sharpen your thinking by reading and reflecting on ideas that strengthen your perspective. You commit to developing professional skills that increase your independence. You organize your finances carefully so that your future remains stable, and you surround yourself with environments that encourage growth instead of constant distraction.